waiting room. Let me just see. Yeah, I think that's everyone. Oh, yeah. I just want to check that everyone can see the slides and hear me okay? Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, I'm gonna make a start then. Thank you so much for coming today. We hope you find this useful today. So I'm Konami, I'm one of the plan project officers, and I'll be doing this presentation today with Cassie, our program manager. So we're just gonna go through the accreditation process for the 6th edition of standards, and hopefully this can help you all kind of understand more about the review process and what you can do to kind of streamline the review process, as well as where we can support you as well. Yeah, so I hope that all sounds okay. Just gonna move the next slide. Yep. So the aims of today is to just discuss commonly not met standards and share key tips for going through the review process and to answer any questions you all might have. So yeah, that's what we'll go through today. So just to go through the review cycle a bit. So this diagram shows an overview of our review process, and we'll go through some of these sections in detail later. But just to give you an overview, at the top, we start with a set of our agreed standards, and we're currently shifting from the 6th to the 7th edition, but today we'll talk mainly about the 6th edition. And then the next bit under self-review. So this is a 12-week process where services complete the self-review on our online system CARS, and just go through the standards and rate themselves, their service against our standards. And we'll also discuss this further, or later. And then the third bit, so for the peer review day, this is a day visit or alternatively an online visit where the peer review team will validate the services responses from the self-review. And then the fourth box, we have the accreditation process. So after the data we collect from the self-review and the peer review day, we'll help teams go through the accreditation committee. So this is where we ask teams to provide a bit more evidence about standards that we just couldn't see evidence for either through the self-review or peer review day. And then once we collect that evidence, we prepare services to go through the accreditation committee meeting. We'll discuss that a bit more in detail later as well. And this is where the accreditation committee will make a decision whether the teams are accredited. I just want to highlight that the plan team does not make that decision. So we'll be with the accreditation committee. And then the last step, so learning from the reviews. So after going through the accreditation committee, services will receive the final report and also be sent an action plan for future improvements. And hopefully we hope that services can use this to kind of just learn from the review process and just also identify areas where we can support services in areas of improvements. Yeah, and also just like to highlight that this cycle that I just detailed is mainly for accreditation reviews. So it will be slightly different for developmental reviews, which we'll discuss later as well. Also, this information is sent out in our review guidance book that we email out when services start their self-review process. So if you ever want to refer to a document for more information on this, we do have a review guidance document for services. Yeah, so that's the cycle. I'm just gonna move on to the next slides. So the purpose of the review process. So we aim for the review process to be a supportive and engaging experience for services. And so the plan project team, we're here to highlight any achievements and areas of good practice the service may have, as well as to help and support any areas for improvements. So this can include during the whole review process to encourage services for honest reflection, to engage staff, patients, and carers in process of quality assurance and service development, to encourage validation. sorry, to encourage, validate, and measure service improvements, to enable action plans for service developments, and to support teams in continually improving their services in a supportive and constructive way. So this is our aim for the review process is, just to support you guys. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next. Oh, before I go into further detail about each step, does anyone have any questions so far? No? Okay, that's not a problem. Okay, so I'm just gonna go a bit more into each section. So for the self-review, this is where teams will start off with the review process. So we will send out an email to let you know that your self-review will be opening. And once the self-review starts, we do ask services to collect the following surveys during a 12-week period. So we'll need 10 patient surveys, 10 carer surveys, 10 acute colleague surveys, 10 case notes, and 20 staff surveys. Just to note that we understand smaller teams will have less than 20 staff. That's all right as well. If it's under 20, just to complete however much staff you have. In addition to the surveys, teams will also need to complete a checklist on CARS, and we'll go through that in more detail later. And just some tips for gathering feedback for these surveys. So we do encourage teams to start collecting surveys as soon as their self-review starts. So for the patient and carer surveys, we do provide Word copies in the email, and this can be printed out and kind of sent off to patients and carers. And then we do also send out prepaid envelopes. So if you would like to print the Word copies out, send them to patient and carers. We do have prepaid envelopes for these paper surveys to be sent back to us, and then we'll input the data into CARS. Just to let you know that that is an option as well. Other options are to use QR codes. We also provide posters, which is co-produced with our patient care representatives. Services can link in with peer support workers or lived experience representatives, or link in with the patient experience team. And this is just to help get as much feedback as possible. And just to make sure to ask everyone for their feedback, this really helps us understand how the service is doing. And we also have flexibility with these. Especially if patients and carers would like to do phone calls instead, we're happy to collect feedback in that way as well. But yeah, those are just some tips. And moving into CARS, I know it's a bit small, so I will zoom in a bit later. Just an overview about CARS. So the checklist. So the checklist includes the standards. So this is where services will go in and comment how they've met or not met each standard. Yes, and the services will need to provide commentary as well. So this is where CARS comes in, so services can do that. And just to note, for the evidence bank, on top of commentary and identifying whether the standard has been met or not, for the evidence bank, we do also need documents. So this can be policies, meeting minutes, case notes, etc. That's the most appropriate to provide evidence for that standard. And just to note that all evidence must be anonymized before uploading. And let me zoom in. I'm just going to stop sharing because I don't think I can zoom in here. Let me, 1 second. I'm going to, there we go. And let me open. Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah, okay, that's good. Let me, okay. So this is a screenshot of this is a test this is a test checklist on CARS. So this is a screenshot of the evidence bank that I just talked about. I don't know if you can see my mouse.
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay, that's great. So here, I know this is missing some icons, but here, where it has the file, this is where you can click to upload evidence. So you can click here, and then there's gonna be a box that pops up just to make sure that it has been anonymized, and then you can upload it and put it onto CARS, and then we'll see this when we download the workbook. So this is where you can upload evidence. And I know it's not in here, but usually to the right, there is a little comment, like a speech bubble icon. If you click on that, this is where you can upload the commentary. So this is where services can provide comment on how they've met, or maybe how have they not met the standard. And this helps us understand the response a bit more. And then to the left, you can see the response. So if you click on the drop down arrow, it will come up with met, not met, and for some standards, there will be a not applicable option, and you can just choose the one that best fits, reflecting on your service. And that's how you use CARS. And then there's going to be each section for each of the meetings. So at the top, you can see there's a manager's meeting section, the staff meeting section, acute colleagues meeting section, patient family care meeting, and case note audit, and as well as the contextual information. But for all these sections, we do need all of this completed to go ahead with the peer review day. We're happy to be flexible to help you meet 100% completion. It's just that we need this information so we can ask about it and discuss about it on the peer review day. I'm just gonna stop sharing. Let me see. I'll show this one as well because it's a bit different. If I can find it. There we go. Okay. And then just to show, so the previous picture was of the evidence bank. This is for the managers meeting. So you'll see that there isn't the Word doc or document icon because we just need the response and the commentary for the managers meeting and the rest of the meeting. Again, there will be a purple speech bubble icon to the right where you can click to upload commentary. But that should be it about CARS. I just want to check, Cassie, did I miss anything, or do you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered everything. I guess the key thing with using CARS is we can collate everything into one place. So that's where we ask for the scores, and what it does is provides the basis of that peer review visit. So Konami mentioned it needs to be completed. It's because, and she'll talk more about it, but the peer review day is to validate all of that information we've got before. If anything's missing, there's still time to provide it, but it means that standards can be not met following the review because we're missing that information or that evidence. And what it does is then increases the amount of evidence we then need for the accreditation committee. So particularly with the evidence, that's where we please do upload it there, and it uploads all into one place, and you'll be able to access it afterwards as well should you ever want to, but it just means everything's stored in one place and it is the most accessible, and we can share that with the peer review team as well.
Thank you, Cassie. Thank you. But that's how we use CARS, and that's how services can use Evidence Bank to upload evidence, like Cassie said, so we can have that beforehand. Let me go back to sharing my slides, if I can find them. Okay. So that's all about CARS. Again, if you have any questions or issues using the online system CARS, please do not hesitate to get in contact with us. We're more than happy to help you with any questions, issues you have, either if it's accessing login details or just anything about CARS. Feel free to ask us. Okay. Okay, so preparing for the peer review day. So the peer review day, we will give you that date of the peer review when your self-review starts. So yeah, we'll have that already scheduled in and we'll communicate that with you when you start your self-review. So for the day, we do need 2 rooms booked, as some meetings will occur simultaneously on the day. So we'll need separate rooms to carry out 2 separate meetings. This could be, I think, for example, it could be like the managers meeting, the staff meeting happening at the same time. So we'll need separate rooms for that. And organizing or having a list of patient and carers to call. It's always nice to speak to patients and carers face-to-face on the day. But if not, we're also happy to call them as well during that blocked out time on the timetable. And then sending through an anonymized case note. So this can also be an assessment, anything, any kind of comprehensive assessment or case note that's completely anonymized, or alternatively a template. So we'll go through that on the peer review day with the peer review team. And just to order lunch, so we can have lunch together. We could just have informal chats with everyone. It's a good time to just socialize and just get to know everyone a bit better. And lastly, inviting staff and acute colleagues. So we would like to speak to a range of staff and acute colleagues as much as possible on the day, so we can get a wider picture of the service and get as much feedback as possible. Okay. And then, just in general, so for the peer review day, we do aim for the day to be a supportive environment to gather additional information on how the service operates and to validate the self-review data. So we'd like to hear about any achievements the service would like to share, as well as any improvements that we can help support with. And just in general, we'll also ask how, if the standard is met, how is it met? If it's not met, then just understanding why and just trying to understand how we can possibly help you meet the standard. And as well, at the end of the day, we do have a feedback meeting to discuss any preliminary data the peer review team picks up throughout the day. And this space can also be used for the service and the peer review team to share any tips, ideas, and solutions. So sometimes services may be going through the same thing, and maybe someone on the peer review team was able to, have some kind of solution that they worked out with the team that they can share with the service. So they'll have time for those discussions as well. That's the self-review and the peer review day. Does anyone have any questions about those steps or that process? No, everything good? Okay, that's good. Just moving on. Oh, and I'm going to pass over to Cassie she'll discuss about preparing for the AC.
Thanks, Konami. So one of the key things that happens with the review process is a lot of work goes in before the peer review day itself. So I say it's similarly to our events. If anybody's hosting an event before, there's a lot of work, a lot of planning going on beforehand, and then the event day kind of just runs and happens, and it's down to all of that prep work. However, there might be, and there will most likely be, not met standards following the peer review day. And that's for a number of reasons. Particularly after the review day, not met does not mean the team aren't doing it. And I think that's a really important point to keep in mind. It doesn't mean it's a criticism of the team. It might be that the way we evidenced the standard wasn't sufficient for that. So I'm thinking particularly, and I will come on to some of the commonly not met standards, but patients and carers are offered a written summary of the assessment. We ask patients and carers for feedback. It could be that patients have said yes, but carers are giving that mixed response. So we need other evidence to help evidence that standard. As I say, it doesn't mean that the team aren't providing it. It's just that our feedback's a bit mixed, so we need something else. So Konami, if you click once. So for accreditation, team and for the accreditation committee, who are made up of a multidisciplinary team, and they are staff and clinicians within liaison services, also going through the review process, acute colleagues, or those with lived experience, so our patient and carer reps. To award accreditation, and for them to do that, teams need to meet 100% of type 1 standards, at least 80% of type 2 standards, and at least 60% of type 3 standards. And that's because you might already know, but type 1 standards are those that relate to patient safety, dignity, and the law. So those are the ones that are considered essential to meet. They're the essential criteria for all liaison teams. For type 2s, those are what a good service would be expected to meet. So teams need to meet at least 80% of those. And type 3 standards are those that are more aspirational or not directly within control of the liaison team. And teams need to meet at least 60% of these. So after the peer review day, so we've used the workbook to pull through together the team's commentary, the scores against the individual standards, the evidence, and all of those survey responses. We've gone through that on the day, validating that, digging in deeper to any standards that we might need more clarification on, and we pull that together into what we call the draft report. It's called a draft report. It's really just the report following the peer review visit, but of course the team and the peer review team are able to feed back. The first bit, make sure everything's accurate. If we've misunderstood something, or we've got the wrong name for things, we can amend that, and then the team will also be asked to provide any evidence for particularly those not met type 1 standards, and then the team are able to choose. If the threshold for 2s and 3s aren't met, you can choose which ones you would like to provide evidence for. Konami, can you click once, please? The other thing we will do is also offer to meet with the team, and that's one we find is often helpful to have a conversation rather than have emails, because it's just easier to have that very quick follow-up when you're having a conversation, of course. So we'll offer a Teams meeting, and that's again just to provide any clarification, go through it with the team. The other thing that we'll provide is also templates and best practice wherever possible. So for templates, one of the things we can often ask for is an audit of cases, particularly where patient and carer feedback has been mixed, we'll ask for an audit instead. We've got a template that really helps easily see, and for the accreditation committee to see this is met, because so we'll ask you to say yes or no against the standard, but also some of that information from the case notes themselves. So going back to the written copy of the assessment, so maybe the care plan, yes or no, was this recorded? Yes or no, was this given to the patient? Yes or no, was this given to the carer? And we know this because it's clearly documented by patient received a copy. And then it's also where you can highlight if the patient declined the carer involvement, so that you weren't able to provide it, because that's again more contextual information we can use. One of the other best practice examples we have is staff receive training on recognising and communicating with people with learning disability or cognitive impairment. We've got an example from another team of the kind of training we're looking for. We found that some teams get confused, and it could be about autism or about Alzheimer's, for example, but we're looking at those key tips to be able to communicate with someone. It's not necessarily the understanding of the learning disability or cognitive impairment. It's about how to communicate. So breaking down questions, sometimes simplifying what you're saying. But we've got an example that is also available on our online discussion forum, Knowledge Hub. After today, we'll also share that, because we really do encourage everybody to join that, because it's where we'll post all of these best practice examples in an online library. So you're able to go in and download it and have a look at any point. Next slide, please, Konami. So we will, alongside the draft report, we will pull through the not met standards, and we will pull it through into a separate document that we call the AC working document. And this is a one document that is between yourselves, us, and the accreditation committee. And we find it helps keep everything in one place, rather than you as the team having to scroll through the whole report. It's a one separate document that will go through, update through the AC process, and then we'll update the report afterwards. I will go through the different points in a moment, but I will share what the guidance looks like. Can everybody see that okay? Is it zoomed in enough? Fab. So here will be kind of the key details. So you've got service name. So mine is Unicorn Hospital, and the self-review period was the 1st of January to the 18th of May, and the peer review date is coming up on the 15th of June. The inspector report rating, so at the self-review, we will ask for a copy of the latest inspector report rating. I think everybody here is based in England, so that's your CQC report. We do find lots of the time liaison aren't mentioned. That's fine. It's just you might provide it for your trust, or if you have been reviewed, maybe as part of the acute trust instead, you're welcome to share that, and it's just highlighting it for the AC. You'll then have this table that breaks down how the team are performing against the standards so far. So we can see type 1 standards, there's 99 that are applicable to me. So Konami mentioned earlier, some standards might be not applicable, and that's okay. We've got things like if the team prescribe medication, there's a medication policy. The team might not do that. We find lots of our services don't. We've also got standards on psychological therapies and children and young people. So if the team don't provide longer term psychological therapy, so that's 4 sessions or more, it's not about using psychologically informed interventions during your sessions with the patient or your assessment process. It's about those very specific follow-up sessions. Or if you never see anybody under the age of 18, then those standards will become not applicable. So I've got 99 standards applicable to my team. I've currently met 71 of those, which is 72%. So I know how many I need to meet to get to 100%. And for type 2, there's 63 standards applicable to me, and I'm just not quite hitting that 80% threshold. However, I'm met 90% of the type 3 standards, so I don't need to worry about those at all. Then we will pull through those not met type 1 standards first. What I've done in this section is include our most commonly not met standards. So this is what was coming up through the AC for last year. We did a review of those standards. The first one is the liaison team has access to assessment rooms suitable for conducting high-risk assessments. Now, what we often find is this is not met for two particular reasons. So in terms of having no ligature points, having an alarm system, there being two doors, a window to be able to observe, but giving enough privacy, those bits are met. But it's not met often because we don't have a risk assessment of the ceiling. Now, we don't specify anything more than that. You might do it, you might get the estates team to do it, but we look for a risk assessment of the ceiling. So the office I'm in at the moment, I'm just going to share my camera. Can you see it's the ceiling tiles? So this is the reason we ask for it, because there can be, we don't specify what the ceiling should look like. And some people have ceiling tiles, but they put things in like an alarm system. So if you were to press, push the tile, that will go off, so staff know to go in and check in on the room, or other people have a completely flush ceiling. We often get a risk assessment of the whole room. That's also accepted. But the thing to bear in mind is if it starts highlighting that there's lots of ligature risks or anything that's high risk, that will need to be worked on before that standard can be met. We can't accredit, so the standard does state about having no ligature points, but we can't accredit a room that your own risk assessment says has a number of problems within it and has a lot of things that are high risk. Those need to be worked on. The other point is rounded corner protectors. Now, this is where there are sharp edges of the wall coming together. So often just a protruding part could be in a corner and it's on that very edge. So what we ask for, somebody once described it, it's like that soft play material. You can have it put against the corner. So we're not looking at like a sticky back plastic that protects the corner from being chipped by paint. It's more of that cushioned side, so that it reduces the risk of harm against that sharp corner. It doesn't obviously eliminate all of these, but the standard has all of those different specifications to reduce the risk of harm within the room. So that is what we'd be looking for. The support we can offer is, one, the standard is there and we have separate guidance that I'll share in just a moment that includes pictures. We're also happy to put people in contact with each other to find out exactly where people bought things and did things. So that's always, we're always happy to help with that. But this is the standard that we talk about the most, usually because it includes having the acute trust and acute hospitals buy-in. We would recommend starting work on this as soon as possible rather than waiting for after the review day. We've had a separate lunch and learn about the high risk assessment room as well, where we had a team present with their acute colleagues, so you can access that after today as well. One of the other standards, so you can see we've got the standard number, the type, so 63 is a type 1. Patients are asked if they and their carers wish to have copies of correspondence about their health and treatment. So for this, it's often the GP letter, but you might have done letters to other services. So we ask patients and carers for their feedback. So you can see for my team, patients were really clear. They were asked if they wanted copies, but the majority of carers can recall being offered that information. And we find that really common within Psych Liaison. And we've actually seen an increase of this sort of feedback since COVID. We know COVID, people were often restricted on being able to bring a companion with them to A&E. So it could be down to that, but it's almost even more important that way to ask carers and get their involvement if they haven't been able to attend. So where that feedback was mixed, rather than us doing continuous resurveys and getting more and more of that feedback, what we ask for is an audit of 10 cases. as I say, we've got a template that the team can use, but for this one, we are specifically looking at whether carers are asked. It's also where you can put in not applicable if the patient didn't give consent for their involvement. And then we're looking at those other ones of where patients did give consent, were those carers for the majority of the time offered, and we're looking at really a 75% threshold. So you can, of those 10, just say you have 3 where it's not applicable, you've then got 7 cases, and 75% of those we're looking at carers being offered a copy of those letters. The next one is standard 173, and this is specifically for teams working with those under 18. So we do have, it's not applicable for a lot, but for those teams it is applicable to. We find this comes up quite regularly. So all clinical staff working with young people have level 3 training. What we ask for is a training matrix, and we're looking at at least 75% of staff being trained. And you can see for my team, this is not met because the evidence wasn't provided. So it might have been missed, and we will try and highlight things as soon as we see it being missed, but it's something that we would have asked for during that self-review to be uploaded. And this is where it can, as I say, really reduce. The more evidence we get at the self-review against all of those standards in that evidence bank that Konami mentioned, it reduces the amount of things that we might need to ask for following the day. One of the other ones, this is very similar to what we spoke about before with the copies of letters of care and treatment, but patients and their carers are offered a written summary of the assessment. Now, both patients and carers gave mixed responses on this one. So they were happy, patients were happy about receiving copies of letters, but for the written summary, it was mixed. On our surveys, and just to let everybody know, we do specify it could be written on the team's leaflets. We know that's what a lot of our services do. So again, we're looking for an audit. Now, it can be the same cases that you're auditing for standard 63. You can simply add on columns on the Excel spreadsheet. And again, we can use those same cases rather than auditing 20 different cases. You can do the same 10 and carry on there. Were there any questions about that at all? So the other thing, just to show you very quickly on that document is, so I said before, it would go between ourselves to you, the host team, back to us and to the accreditation committee. So we will fill out the first columns up to peer review commentary. That will be whatever's in the report, including the recommendation of what to provide. You're then able to fill out the service commentary evidence bit, so you can add in any additional commentary should you wish, and then specify what evidence you're providing. Some people include the document in here. You can often just drag it from your folder, or you might send it as an email attachment. Just let us know exactly what document title it is. And then here we've got the accreditation committee commentary, and that's what we'll update after the team are presented to that AC. If it's not met still, then we'll again specify exactly what's needed, and then you'll be able to update on the next column of what you're providing then. So looking at the high risk assessment room, can everybody see this one clearly? So as I say, this is the one that we really do talk about the most, and it's a really high amount of services. So there is a number of bullet points and guidance for this standard. So we've broken it down. You can see be appropriately decorated, and it's got some guidance there. Have an observation panel. have a ceiling which has been risk assessed. As I say, this is the bit that comes up one of the most times. Not have any ligature points, only include furniture, fittings and equipment which are unlikely to cause harm. And here you have some photo examples. So we've got strip alarm, we've got heavy weighted furniture with soft edges. We've got a nice mural here in this room. We've got what I call a vistamatic window. So it's a window with integrated blinds, so you can close it completely and reopen it. You've got an open outwards door, anti-ligature handles, and we've got these rounded corner protectors, again just showing you what it looks like. So we've got that guidance, so you're welcome to use it at any point. It's freely available, and we'll share that. We can also do letters of support, so we do this from our accreditation committee. If you find that the acute hospital, they might be a little bit slow or they might have other priorities, we're here to help as much as possible. So we can do letters saying this needs to be done, this needs to be done for the team to be accredited, and we'll put in deadlines and things to try to help. Konami, you can go back to the slides now. So moving on to the AC decisions. So there are three main decisions that the AC will make. One is deferred. So this was the most common of decisions for last year. So teams presented in 2022, they were presented on average 1.8 times to the AC. So deferred is the team aren't quite meeting the threshold for accreditation, but it's realistic the team can meet those other standards within a short period of time. So that will be the team are able to come to the next accreditation committee meeting with that additional evidence, and then be reviewed again. The least common is not accredited. So that's where the team have a number of not met standards, they don't meet the threshold for accreditation, and it's not realistic they meet that in a short period of time. Our AC really do try to give the team time, but this is, as I say, our least used AC decision. And then we've also got accredited, which is the team have met the threshold and that they can be accredited. As I say, deferred is there and is used, as I say, usually once. One thing to really keep in mind is accreditation is there for those teams that are well resourced and providing a good service. What we often find is teams are really struggling and the process isn't there to be a burden. So we do have other review options as well. So we've put together this table to really show the difference. So Konami's gone through that accreditation process and shown you that cyclical process. But we've also got what we call developmental, and this can be really useful if the team are struggling or you're lacking resources, or you're not meeting a number of standards and you won't meet it in a short time period. That's okay, we can do the developmental option instead. Even if the team's begun the accreditation option and you go, no, this isn't, we've identified a number of things that we're not meeting at the moment and we don't think we'll be able to meet, that's okay, we can move to developmental. So you can see you still get that local report summarising the review data. It will include recommendations on how to meet standards in the future. There isn't an accreditation status, so the team will be listed as members with the network. Some people prefer this instead of getting not accredited, which can be quite disheartening to the team. We do discuss the individual standards on the review day, and it's where you can find out from the peer review team. They might have different ideas of what they've done within their service. The team, as I say, won't be presented to the AC, and there's not that time sensitive need to provide evidence really. The team can do, but what we would look at is generally a peer review visit about a year after, and again the team might choose another year of developmental or may feel ready to go through the AC. And as a very different option, we've got a discussion-based review, and this really came about during COVID, where lots of our teams, it was still to have that benefit of a peer review, but taking out the task of going through the individual standards, gathering all of that evidence. So what we do is we ask for some feedback from people, but again, those thresholds that Konami mentioned for those surveys, those we still ask for that, but those don't need to be met. It's to help provide a basis of what's going on and what are people saying about the service at the moment. It takes away completely that time sensitive need to provide evidence, and we don't talk about the individual standards. We'll have more focused conversations throughout the shorter day, and we can hone in on particular bits that the team either need development in or are finding a challenge, and you can have those conversations more with the peer review team, who can share ideas as well about how to overcome those. That is our overall part of the AC, and particularly the 6th edition of standards. So highlighting those standards that are particularly not met, and how to complete the self-review, and also what we're looking for. One last thing I wanted to mention before going through this summary is what after the peer review day and when providing evidence, what can be the most sort of the thing you most want to do is provide numerous documents for one standard and hope you've covered everything. What helps is really being specific as to where we're looking for things. So we wouldn't really be looking at lots of documents for one standard. The only exception would be information provided to patients and carers. You might have different leaflets, but really stating where to find it. We're human, so the project team will go through that evidence beforehand, but we are human. We'll prepare everything, but of course things can get missed, and the more evidence and more documents provided, really the more confusion that will come. So really being specific, are you providing that audit? Are you providing this training matrix? Are you providing this operational policy where on page 7 it has the information needed? That's really, really helpful and will really help streamline the team's journey through the AC. So in summary for today, the review process is really there to be a reflection and a learning opportunity, and it's there to be useful to the team. So when you do the self-review in particular, you'll probably find lots of things that you're doing really well that you might not have identified beforehand, but also things that will be an area of development, and that's where we're there to help. So where we have these conversations come up, we try to hold things like these 1-hour lunch and learn sessions. We'll put things in other events, put things on Knowledge Hub. So recently we've had a lot of queries about the 1-hour response time to A&E referrals and when people are recording that. So we're doing work about that, and we're going to hold event sessions on it. So that's where we can help, where we see things are coming up, but also put individual teams in contact with others where we know they're doing it well. It's also there to highlight areas for improvement, and so that we can support you to make changes. So that goes in line with what I've just said. We'll try to provide resources where we can, but as I say, we can do things like these lunch and learn sessions. One that we had was our teams were really struggling on the patient and carer involvement standards, so having people involved in the service development, QI initiatives and on interview panels. So what we did was got a couple of our patient and carer reps to do a presentation on with practical tips of what teams can do. They were absolutely brilliant. So what we did, because it was really, really practical, was turned it into a practical workbook. So that's freely available on Knowledge Hub, and we can email it to you, but it includes all the things to think about, because as I say, we know a lot of our teams struggle. It's not as easy as on an inpatient ward. Things to think about, what you can do, how to get people involved, and it's something you can work on in the background, and it's just a resource to try to help teams. And always, if in doubt, please do speak to us. We are absolutely here to help. So if the team are struggling with anything, we can give suggestions, ideas, but also make allowances. So one of the things Konami spoke about earlier is with patient and carer feedback. We find sometimes people either prefer the phone calls or filling out the surveys. So we'll be flexible. If people would prefer to do one over the other, that's absolutely fine. That is it from me and Konami. We want to open it up to any questions at all. No, that's no problem at all. If anybody has any questions after today, you can email us at planetrcpsych, and we can. Oh, Mira, you've got a question.
That was my next question. Each email going through standards. If we wanted if there was a quick query, a quick focused query, but that's helpful to, yeah.
And we'll share a copy of these slides as well with you all. The other thing, so you'll have the link to Knowledge Hub, but we really do encourage you to sign up to it. We also list our upcoming events. There's a forum where you can post and answer questions with other colleagues. So you might have a question outside of the standards that is allowed. So you can ask what other people are up to and find out from them as well. And as I say, there's the online library. So we also post our previous event resources and things like that on there. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been lovely to see you all. We hope you found it useful. We do have a recorded session about our 7th edition of standards. So any teams having a peer review visit from this September onwards, will be on the 7th edition of standards. And those are slightly different to our 6th edition. So we've done a session on that you can have a look at. We've also got what we call an evidence guide. So we've detailed exactly how each standard is evidenced through the review process, so that you can start getting prepared and ready for your review day. Thank you so much, everybody. And if you have a question after today, please do get in contact. But lovely to see you all.
Lovely. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.